Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. Round 4 of Norway Chess saw the ever tasty pairing of Magnus Carlsen against Anish Giri. Somehow, there's always a bit of edge to this contest between these two, even if they're best frenemies. I can't even say it properly. They get on well, but there's always a little bit of needle. Carlsen playing white, and Giri goes for this very trendy semi-Tarrasch, or Tarrasch. So pawn takes pawn, and here instead of the old move pawn takes pawn, or even knight takes pawn, gets these semi-Tarrasch positions. Giri goes for pawn takes pawn on d4, which, as I said, is currently very popular among the big guys. It's always thought that this was simply bad for black because of this move e4, which has been played a lot. But with the benefit of engine analysis, it's been shown that black can actually hold on in this endgame. It's quite a forcing variation. It's easy to prepare with that for black. So instead of simplifying, Carlsen keeps pieces on the board. And this is also quite a popular line at the moment. But white players like to do this because obviously it just keeps a bit more juice in the position. So in the recent online Chessable Masters tournament, we had Pragnananda against Ding Liren, which went rook d1. Also very interesting, which Prag actually won that game. But we have bishop e2. Knight e6 and queen d3. So, we have a pretty standard isolated queen's pawn position. But you could say that, black's pieces aren't so active as in many other IQP positions. h6, bishop h4. Nevertheless, black is still very solid, and it's a very harmonious placement for black's pieces, actually. Castle's kingside. And now queen b6. Queen's on a good square on b6, looking at the d4 square, also looking at the pawn on b2, and the rook's prepared to come into the middle. Carlsen has actually had this position with black himself. He's played queen b6 himself. And, well, he defeated Prag in one game that went a3, like this. But he was definitely worse in this game. This is quite a nice example of how, white rather restricts black's pieces, and this is not an easy position for black, actually. But instead of a3, no doubt Giri was ready for that, Carlsen just exchanged on f6. And there's no point in giving up your lovely bishop here unless you take this pawn. So the position simplifies, and Giri took on b2. Queen attacks the bishop, so white hasn't got time to play rook b1. So bishop c4, bishop comes to this great diagonal. So, if the queens were exchanged here, I think we could probably say, well, it's going to be a draw. There aren't any particular weaknesses in black's position. Black's pieces are quite harmoniously placed. Well, with the queens on, there's a little bit of pressure here. There's potential to play rook b1, of course. But here, Giri already makes, to my eyes, a massive misjudgment. It's necessary to do something about the queen. So queen a3. Just popping the queen out of the way. At the moment, everything's protected. The rook protects this pawn. b7 is a weak point. But basically, black has things just about under control. Maybe the knight can come here to protect this. And with this bishop sort of controlling the knight, then it's hard for white to make progress here. But okay, it's a little bit more comfortable for white, but with care, black should equalise. But instead of that, Giri took the rook in the corner, so now we have a material balance of 2 rooks against the queen. The problem with this is that somehow these 2 points, it's more evident that they're weaker. And I think particularly with the opposite coloured bishops, it's much easier for white to attack. And, well, okay, I'll give you the move here. How would you play if you had white in this position? I mean, I think this position was an absolute gift for white to play. And I'm surprised that Giri went for this. I know, it's easy for me to criticise. I'm sitting here in the comfort of my office. Anyway, cheers, my customary slurp of tea. So what did you come up with? White to play G4. I mean, this makes so much sense. First things first, gives the king an escape square. And notice it's a white square. It's the opposite colour to this bishop. So the king is perfectly safe on G2. So no problems with the back rank. And G4, well, the pawn threatens to advance, opening up black's king position. And then, well, white's pieces are so well placed for the attack. And yeah, there are a lot of weak points in the position. Even this bishop can sometimes be loose. And this is a problem. The queen loves it when there are weaknesses in the enemy position. It's because it's such a powerful piece. It can just zip all over the board so easily. And particularly here, because actually the centre of the board is pretty clear. So the queen has a lot of mobility in this open position. Giri hastens to protect these weak points. So Carlsen didn't go G5 immediately, he instead plays H4. And rook E7. So the rook protects these points. But G5. And white is well underway. So now there's a threat to play G6, among others. I mean, there are several threats here. You know, maybe just exchanging on H6. But G6, obviously exploiting this pin, could be very nasty. So pawn takes pawn, played. Now knight takes pawn. So the knight enters the attack. And actually, white has a very clear threat in this position of queen f5 ducking into h7, because of course g6 isn't possible. Well, let me show you this. Okay, let me make a random move here. Queen f5 and checkmate threatened, and if g6, that can be taken. That's the point. White always exploits this pin. So after knight g5, Giri whizzed back with the bishop. Queen f5 anyway. And this is the point. Giri exchanges off that dangerous knight. However, the pawn takes its place. And once again, g6 is a very unpleasant threat. And once again, g6 is not possible because the queen can simply take it. That's pinned. So what about knight e5? The obvious move here is knight e5. This wasn't played, but let's just look at knight e5. Attacks the bishop. And now, is it possible to play g6? If black can play this and get away with it, everything's fine. But no. Queen f6 hits the rook. And now f4. The knight has to move, and then queen g6. There is no defense to that. So after h takes g5, rook e5. But now, I mean, Giri is scrambling now. This is such an unpleasant position. Weaknesses on both sides of the board. It's not just f7, it's not just the king, but b7 is also vulnerable as well. And again, if g6, queen f6, threatening here, king h7, bishop f7, white just crashes in. So rook c5 played. g6, there we go, the pawn is in. The knight comes over. So Giri has managed to put up some kind of defense. But, you know, this pin is everlasting. You know, it's so hard to break free from that. And white always has opportunities to strengthen the position, either coming in with the queen or attacking these pawns, or even, you know, advancing this pawn. So the game went rook h5, queen c7, there we go. Starts to hit out at those pawns on the other side of the board. And the glorious thing about this position for white is that the king is completely safe. There's no danger of a counterattack here. So Giri is desperately trying to shake free from this bind. Queen a7, that's another pawn in the bag. Afraid there's still a pin here. e4. Queen c7. This just covers some squares very, very nicely here as well. King f6. And after a4, Giri decided he'd had enough. I mean, black simply cannot break free here. Let me just give you one example of that. At the moment, black's pieces are kind of glued together and are not vulnerable. But as soon as black starts to try to bring them into play, then, well, watch what happens. The queen just upsets the coordination completely. Queen here. The king can't keep hold of that rook. Well, if the king moves, it's just taken. So the knight has to come back. And now, well, black has made no progress. You know, bishop d5. You know, that anchors in the middle of the board, and then, you know, the pawn just goes home. You know, white basically doesn't need to shake the tree too hard here in order to win. Such a beautiful position. Comparatively simple win for Carlsen there. You know, once he got to this position, which really is a gift to play, a very straightforward attack. And I think Giri will be kicking himself for exchanging queen for two rooks. I think I'm right in saying that the last classical game, this is classical chess they're playing, the last classical game that they played together was in the Tata Steel tournament in January. And Giri also got absolutely whacked there in a really nice Catalan. You can check that game out. Check it out on my channel. So yeah, Giri seems to struggle against Magnus. Magnus has his number at the moment. Let me just give you the score. So with that win in the classical game, Carlsen bounces up equal with Anand. They're both on 8.5 points. Wesley So still playing very well. He's on 7.5. At Mamedyarov on 7. So Carlsen and Anand sharing the lead at the moment, and they go into a rest day in Norway Chess. But I will be reporting back. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.